best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fine?
You think you've seen the sun, but you ain't seen it shine.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Ask the Treksperts, the show where we answer your questions about Star Trek. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
And I'm Adam.
Adam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, man. Today we are chatting about the William Shatner documentary about Star Trek The Next Generation, Chaos on the Bridge, which is all about the kind of myriad insane issues they had making that show and getting it started in the first place, and all of the rigors and scary things that really nobody talked about before this, or at least very often. When you hear a lot of the TNG actors on the convention circuit, and even in interviews on DVDs and stuff, talk about the show, the spin is always, we were a family, and it was, and we were always joking around on the set and stuff, and occasionally you'd hear stories of kind of like light, people like getting on each other and having little arguments and things, and there's the famous little tiff that Patrick Stewart and Michael Dorn got in at some point, where Patrick Stewart accidentally made some kind of racial slur or something. There's little things here and there that would crop up, but by and large it seemed like they were a family and they got along really well, and that seemed to be more or less, looking at this documentary from what we hear from more of the people behind the scenes, sort of true, but then the difficulty and the insanity came from writers and producers, and really Roddenberry butting heads with kind of everybody. And why don't we start, I guess, with just the kind of structure and aesthetic of this, and how the whole thing was put together. First of all, I think William Shatner is maybe a better documentarian than he is in anything.
Yeah. I agree, definitely. Who would have thought?
Yeah, and it's become like his big pastime
right.
The last few years, and he seems to have really developed a fascination with the production of the show and the shows afterwards that he was involved with in the first place. You would never think that some of the best information that we've gotten about how Star Trek was made would come from the guy who played Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that he seems to come at it from really creative different angles, and he gets more information than what's out there. I mean, we have lots of information on the making of the show and interviews and things from the cast and crew and everybody, but he comes at it from a different way a lot of times, and he'll get people to say things that they haven't said anywhere else before, and it's really cool the way he does it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I said he's maybe a better documentarian than he is anything. Of course, he's had a long track record of being a really good interviewer, and that probably has a lot to do with why he's able to make such compelling documentaries that give you all this information and get people to say things that, as you said, they probably would never have said to anyone else. I don't know what it is about Shatner and how he's able to really get into people's minds, but he might have been a really good psychologist.
Yeah.
Because he seems to really understand people, and it's really interesting that he's been known for his whole career for his ego, and that that people calling him arrogant for so many decades now, that he's so good at listening. Is kind of surprising to me.
In the interviews, at least, he seems very comfortable and laid back and easygoing, and just kind of presents himself as that kind of person that you can tell him anything, and he'll listen, he'll understand, he'll really be on the same wavelength, and I think that helps people who are he's interviewing. It puts them at ease.
And it's funny that you say that, because I think that's true to a degree, but then at the same time, I think that he is, and manipulation is too strong and mean of a word, but he is somehow rather really good at getting people to open up to him and tell almost like he grills people in a way that doesn't feel like grilling.
Well, what he does is if somebody will say something and they're toning it down a bit, where they're trying to put a nicer spin on it, and he'll question them.
Yeah.
He'll say, he'll repeat what they said, but with a question at the end of it, and they'll be like, well, and they might actually go and say the thing that they wanted to say in the first place.
Is some of it just he's William Shatner, and William Shatner's a big deal, and he's such a presence, and he's such a larger than life figure that it would be difficult to lie to William Shatner. Or it would be difficult to fudge information with William Shatner. And some of it too, I think, is maybe just basic communication skills of he looks so interested. Mm-hmm. That he's like, I want to know. Maybe you forget there's a camera there. Maybe you forget that you're in an interview. You're just talking to Bill Shatner.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think he does a great job with the interviews and everything.
At Planet Comic Con a couple years ago, were you there for that panel?
Yes.
I thought. I mean, I didn't know you then, but we were there, and I thought one of the smartest things that anybody ever did on the convention circuit was have that group tour with Shatner as the moderator. Because, I mean, he keeps them together because they get wild and hilarious and rambunctious. But again, he's able to pull that stuff out of people and get them to open up. And that's I don't know, that's a really impressive skill. I wish that he still had a talk show, because there was a time when he did and it wasn't real popular.
Yeah, it wasn't on like Sundance Channel or something like that.
I was going to say, well, it wasn't on a network anybody was watching.
One of the I can't remember what it was called, like Live Wire.
But the more documentaries I see from William Shatner, the more I feel like he could have been. I mean, he would have been at the point he would have even thought to do it. He would have already been too old, probably. But Shatner would have been great as one of the main late talk show host personalities, I think. I mean, like I think he easily could have gone up against Conan O'Brien and a lot of those guys. But anyway, so he's brilliant at this, and I think this one is structured even better than the Captain's. One thing I think is really impressive about it is that it's an hour long, and it feels longer than that, and not in a boring way. Just it's really dense. I mean, they get a whole lot done. How much was here that you were not aware of?
It's hard to say. I mean, I knew the basic details, or the story about what was going on in the first couple of seasons of Next Generation, especially involving how kind of out there Gene Roddenberry had gotten in between, the end of the original series and when this show went into production and stuff, and I knew about the people involved and stuff, but I didn't. There's the details I didn't know as much as they filled in a lot, I think. For me, at least.
And I don't know if you'd heard any of this stuff.
I hadn't heard very much. I mean, I knew that Hurley was the first guy on the show, and then he changed over at the end of second season, and the show got better. A lot of the
and then Michael Piller being added helped a lot, or being added as one of the main writers helped a lot, and
but I definitely. I knew they went through a lot of writers. I didn't know it was didn't they say 30 writers?
In just the first season. And they couldn't even give you a number for the second season, and they said, was it Michael Piller that had the list in his bathroom?
It was Ron.
Or was it?
It was either Moore or Braga.
But somebody, I think it was Braga. But yeah, he had a list of all the writers that had been fired. In that, I mean, a lot of talk in this, of course, about how Roddenberry tied everybody's hands behind their backs in writing because they weren't allowed to have any conflict on the show because the future was supposed to be perfect. And it's interesting hearing the different perspectives from different people that were kind of forced into that box, because who was it that acted like it was a positive challenge? Like someone comes out really early on and says, I just forget.
I think it was Braga, I think.
Was it Braga? I think maybe it was. I forget. But, that's weird. And of course, all of them I've heard at one time or another complain about that. And that's one of the big things that I have heard people be more candid about than some of the other things that I heard about here. Like I hadn't heard. There's a lot more about Hurley in this than I had known. And about just how he felt about Roddenberry. I didn't know that stuff. Fontana I knew about, and actually they didn't get nearly as much into her relationship with Roddenberry as I might have expected. But I've heard that. Well, you know what though? I'm kind of glad they didn't, because Trek Nation gets real into that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you keep up with these like we do, then you've seen Trek Nation.
I have not.
Oh, you have not? Oh, you need to. Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, geez. Wow, I didn't realize that. Okay, well, you need to, because it's wonderful.
Okay.
Brandon and I reviewed that on the show. But yeah, Trek Nation gets into a lot of the ins and outs of Roddenberry's very complex personality and a lot, just the way he treated people and stuff. But there's some fascinating interviews in that. And George Lucas is interviewed in that, which is really fascinating. Yeah. But and that's a really cool kind of character piece too, because you see because it's all about his son trying to understand what the big deal is about Star Trek in the first place, and he kind of discovers his father through understanding Star Trek, and that sounds sappy, but it totally works. But yeah, watch that, because this is a better documentary if you've seen that.
Okay, I'll check that out.
I think. But anyway, so like that goes into a lot more stuff, even with DC Fontana, yeah, and even a couple of other people.
But like the experience basically soured their 20 years of
working together
and working together.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's real sad, because honestly, if Fontana had been more show running it, or been allowed to do more scripts, and her scripts weren't doctored, those first couple seasons would have probably been a lot better. Certainly, but that almost goes without saying. Although I still don't know how you write under those constraints.
Right.
And but like I said, it was just interesting to hear anybody say, no, that was very challenging. Well, yeah, you're ripping out what makes story. You can't have stories without interpersonal conflict.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have that.
Yeah, and he was all like, well, it forced us to think of new ways to tell a story.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess it forced you to redefine story then.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. The way that really all of the writers and producers, when we hear sound bites about this, talk about it, because of course you never know what's left on the cutting room floor. I was kind of surprised by and really everybody kind of talked about it like this, the idea that the stories got better as soon as it went in more of a character direction, and it was like that isn't a given. I just thought that was kind of weird.
Right.
Well, is it I think Berman, was it Berman or Braga? It was like as soon as we were, or maybe it was even Ron Moore. I think it was Ron Moore.
As soon as we started treating them as actual human beings.
Yeah. As soon as we were telling stories about characters, suddenly it was a better show. Well, yeah, of course it was. But I think he was right. See, it's all running together to me now. Who said what? But I think, and that was kind of your biggest.
That was my biggest
issue with it. But we could talk about that. But the idea that I think this is probably true, that the show probably would have continued past the second season, and maybe even for several years after that, but that we probably wouldn't have gotten anything after that. Right. You know, there's talk about that like TNG had to become this kind of beloved American staple, which of course happened because, I think mainly because Picard became a real person more than anything, because of course he's the main character over anybody else, even without other people get episodes, and he was seen as the stolid, children-hating,
stodgy old guy running the starship.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And then he became the character with kind of the most dimension by the end of it.
And it became the first successful science fiction show, really, on American television, period. I mean, the Twilight Zone, maybe.
Certainly the first one to be number one like it was.
Right. I mean, every other show before that, I mean, it kind of struggled.
And it was also really unheard of for a show like that to be first one syndication and number one.
Exactly.
I liked that Shatner made who was it? The exec? I forget who it was. That he made that guy explain what first one syndication is.
Yes. So people did not understand that, but that's kind of gone away. It was very popular because of Star Trek: The Next Generation back in the 90s, with shows like Babylon 5 and all the shows like Hercules and Xena.
Yeah, and I think I forgot that those were, and I think a lot of the science fiction shows. Well, first of all, you wouldn't have had obviously the big science fiction, I want to say resurgence, but maybe even Renaissance that you had in the 90s. Not that they were all good, but if it obviously if it weren't for TNG,
Right.
and you're right, a lot of them were syndicated. Was Stargate?
Stargate
Or was that
on,
a sci-fi thing in the first place?
Stargate was on.
No, Sci-Fi Channel didn't even exist yet. I don't think, did it?
It did.
When it started.
Stargate was on Showtime when it first started.
No way. Oh,
Yeah,
you're right.
and-
Because I remember that because I had the first season.
Yeah.
And I need to buy the rest of it, but I remember that because because there's a nude scene in the first episode. Yeah, and they put that on the DVD, and then they probably did that when they first run it because it's Showtime. And,
Yeah, and I think that they
forgot all about that.
And then I think it went into like syndication on like for the local stations after that too, and then they switched to the Sci-Fi Channel, I guess.
I really appreciated all that history about first of all the whole first run syndication thing and shopping around to other networks and specifically what the different networks said about it. That was really interesting. Like CBS, I think it was CBS that said we'll do it as a miniseries, which is so interesting since now, fast forward to right now and next year we're going to get a new series and it's going to be on CBS, but they're going to air it weird because they're going to put it on CBS All Access, and it's not going to pass the pilot. It's not, if they continue with their plan right now, it's not going to air on television past that. So they're already doing it in a weird way, and they would have done it weird then too, as just a miniseries. Yes. But anyway, but yeah, isn't it really interesting that there was that talk about maybe launching a fourth network with a new Star Trek, and then that is sort of kind of what happened with Voyager with UPN.
Exactly what happened with Voyager with UPN. Paramount launched the fourth network. They were planning on doing that back in the 70s, and then they went and
then and I said this in another video recently about something else. Dan and I recently did a whole video about the future of television and streaming and what's going on with all that. We talk a lot about CBS All Access, but I made this point then too. I think it's really funny that UPN lives and dies by Star Trek. Like, it starts with Star Trek and it dies with Star Trek. Because Enterprise's last season was the end of that network.
Right. And that was like the only show, really, that was on UPN that anybody even remembered.
They had wrestling, and that was it.
I mean, didn't Buffy switch from
I think it switched
UPN near the end or something.
I forget, and I know that Angel was on the WB.
Yes, I think
But anyway, but that's neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and talk more about the aesthetic and the structure of this, and we can get into some more of the nitty gritty and stuff if we want to. 10 minutes in, and I've watched this twice now. 10 minutes in, I thought that the whole kind of Western aesthetic was a really strange choice, and by the end, I thought it was genius.
Yeah,
I think they did it because of one, all the poker references,
right.
And two, because of the song at the end that they found that had that wackadoodle word in it.
Well, see, I gotta look that up and see if somebody didn't write that song for that movie.
Yeah.
Wackadoo became the catchword for this, and I would imagine that Maurice Hurley probably hates this movie.
Well, I don't think he saw it because he's dead. He
died
last.
I knew. Okay, I forgot. You told me he was dead. I didn't realize he had died before this even came out, or maybe it had just come out.
Yeah. I don't know if he ever saw it.
I'm just saying he probably.
He probably would have hated it.
But I'm glad that we were able to get the interviews with him. Before
Right,
it passed. That's good.
He has nobody to blame but himself.
I know.
For coming off.
I know, but I don't know that it would have focused on him as much had he not been there. And a lot of that stuff I didn't know. I was not aware that he'd never written for science fiction before. I was not aware that he didn't even seem to really like the concept very much. What's baffling to me is that he was, almost to his credit, the whole thing with him trying to keep the integrity of Roddenberry's concept even beyond Roddenberry losing the integrity of the concept. But I don't understand that because he calls his philosophy wackadoo. Right?
Yeah.
Like this whole thing. Okay, I was going to talk structure more, but now we're back into the whatever. Now we're back into content. Oh well. I clearly am not as good of a moderator as William Shatner. No, but this is really interesting to me that he was like, Roddenberry's future, like a philosophy of the future idea is ridiculous and wackadoo, and trying to make a TV show about this is preposterous. And then Roddenberry goes on vacation, and I loved his whole thing where he was like, I'll pay for your ticket, leave. And then it all falls apart because Roddenberry's gone, and you'd think that would be when it found its footing.
Right.
Yeah.
You think that would be when it figured itself out. And I am convinced that if Berman or Braga or Moore or any of those guys had been in charge then,
It would have.
it would have. Or it would have more so.
Yeah. I mean, I think that season in general was hampered because there was a writer's strike.
That's
during
true.
it. So, but I agree with
Okay, but
you.
even if it had happened during season 1, I think,
Yeah, definitely. I had the same reaction about Murray's Hurley. I'm like, you don't believe in this concept, yet you became like a zealot about maintaining the integrity of why.
Yeah, I mean, like, did the idea have any integrity to you in the first place? I mean, with respect to how Roddenberry felt about the whole thing, he obviously was really out of touch at that point. And they talk about this between the distinction between creative vision and drinking the Kool-Aid of what everybody is telling you about your about your vision and about So like, when maybe this should just be a general rule of thumb. When you change from storyteller to philosopher, it might be time to pass it on to somebody else.
Exactly. That's all that during the whole period in the 70s, Roddenberry, from the end of Star Trek till Star Trek the Motion Picture, Roddenberry couldn't get anything made.
That's right.
In Hollywood. I mean, they produced a couple of pilots, and they were all like the same, like exact thing, and they were just variations on like a guy gets frozen and he wakes up in like a post-apocalyptic view. They're all the same. But yeah, beyond that, he spent the whole 1970s just basically going around the college lecture circuit, and he had all these people like, oh my God, you're so amazing, swooning over him and stuff. And that's what I think when he started to really, lose it and believe, what everybody says about him and the great bird of the galaxy and this, visionary and stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, he kind of was, in the sense that, he broke a lot of new ground with TOS in simply having a future in a science fiction thing that was positive. That was just a thing that wasn't really done. And I'm not saying that you can't have a philosophy, and I'm not saying that you can't have a philosophy behind your show, but you can't lose the foundation of what makes for good
TV
stories.
show, yeah.
And as you said, at the very least, what people are going to watch.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there was no character conflict in the original series.
Yeah.
I mean, there was plenty of that, and that's why those characters were so endearing, is because they were arguing all the time. They all had these different ideas about life and how you should live and everything. And so you fast forward to the next generation, and all of a sudden everyone's supposed to get along and have exactly the same ideas and ideals. And, okay, where's the story? Mm-hmm. Now what is there to grab onto for these characters?
Well, what's really interesting is that it just reflects who he was at each of those periods and how he saw himself. And I think this is a very difficult thing for anybody who has a taste of success, and especially when you have just a taste of it, and then you fall out of the limelight and you can't crawl your way up again, and then all of a sudden you're there again and you didn't even quite mean to. And that was a really fascinating thing too. Right. And we'll get to that in a second. But I can certainly sympathize with him a lot in how do you go from writing something basically for yourself and just hoping people will like it to not, and I've talked about this a lot, but to not letting your reputation affect you. Mm-hmm. The way people see you and the way they respond and just what they want from you.
Yeah. Well, then you're writing to expectations and not just your own. Mm-hmm. You're saying, what does everyone else expect? What do they see in my philosophy that maybe I didn't intend in the first place? Yeah. And how do I live up to that?
Yeah, and sometimes even just in your style and what you made, and where your sensibilities were at the point you made a thing versus where they are when now you're rich and famous with some people. like that kind of thing is bound to change you in some way or another, and change your perceptions and your perspective on things. And people wonder all the time, how does a great TV show, and I'm not talking about Star Trek right now, but just in general, how does a great TV show, or how does a great series of books or whatever fall off the rails so hard? A lot of the time is it's either it went on longer than it ought to have, and the person is just out of ideas. But sometimes it's hard to find that distinction between out of ideas and simply like you got too popular and you can't see past that anymore. Like at some point you almost need to stop working for a few years and come back to it, or just do something else entirely. I understand now why so many bands and musicians feel the need to stop for several years and then put out a new album. Like, I used to find that irritating sometimes with bands I really liked, where I was like make new music, And then I would realize that I'm one of those demanding people that's creating these expectations. So I'm just saying that I kind of sympathize with him too, but he was not the guy to make that show. And it is amazing that it became what it was, and turned into, my favorite television series of all time. I mean, it's just amazing that happened. That history, I did not know that. I did not know that Roddenberry, and maybe this was in books somewhere and you knew it and I didn't, but I was not aware that Roddenberry, that it was not his idea to make that show in the first place.
I had heard that they really, wanted him to do it for a long time, and he didn't want to do it. And then finally they said, we're going to do it anyway, so you can either be on board or not. And he was scared of losing control, because when he made the motion picture, they let him do whatever he wanted, basically. And it was a disaster.
It was a disaster.
They went through, I don't remember how many writers and stuff, at least 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who the writer was that he wrote with. They hated each other. Oh my God, it was but yeah, so then after that he got basically bumped out of any involvement really in the movies, and he kept trying to float these kind of weird ideas and stuff about we need to do this movie where the original series crew goes back in time, and it winds up being Spock on the grassy knoll who kills Kennedy or something. Something. But yeah, so I think he was scared.
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen, or we would have never gotten X-Men Days of Future Past. that actually works.
Yeah, I think he was scared of losing control completely of Star Trek at that point. So he said, "We're gonna," he finally went along with doing it. And it was funny because the guy said, I wasn't gonna make this without Gene Roddenberry, but I bluffed my way into.
Yeah, I think that was related. Well, and then that's where the whole kind of poker motif comes in. I think Shatner did such a good job of going back to kind of the way it was put together and the way it was edited. Mm-hmm. I think he did such a good job of taking what he had and finding the thread and creating a narrative out of it, even though it's not. I mean, it's about one person in that it is kind of about Gene Roddenberry. And that's why the thing isn't about all 7 seasons of Next Generation. It jumps at the end and says, "Oh, and by the way, it was on this long," and
and it was successful.
And then of course
nominated for an Emmy.
Mm-hmm. And then of course you have the poker scene at the end of All Good Things, because you gotta put poker in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I really appreciated all the cartoons all the way through it. The Western style cartoons, because they kind of gave a visual for what people were talking about. It was just kind of,
that was an inspired choice. I've not seen that.
What people were thinking.
Well, and I wonder if that didn't come from just, this is going to look really dry and dull if we don't have some kind of extra visual component to it. And I don't know if you had this. The first few I saw, I thought were kind of were kind of intrusive.
Right.
And then as it went along, just the whole Western atmosphere of it in the first place, I came to that became one of my favorite things about it.
A lot of the humor came from those scenes, especially kicking the guy out the window, that was my favorite part.
Yeah, that was great. Well, and then the image of Picard looking real happy with himself when they were like, your job is just to get Picard laid. That whole thing was really funny, and it's kind of of an adult, documentary, obviously, but not, to the point where it's obnoxious.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it still bleeps F-bombs, which I appreciate. But you know, that's just me. Something I was wondering, we watched this in Star Trek Club a few weeks ago, and I mentioned there that I would love to see this as a coffee table book, like those cartoons. There are a lot of them, and obviously you'd have to see the movie to understand what the point of some of them were, but then I think it's one of those books where you could make them sort of like trading cards, where you have an explanation on the back for what the point of them is, or something underneath, and you could have it could be kind of a reference book, and have some of this information in it, and kind of make it like this documentary but in book form to a degree, but make it more about those pictures than anything, because I think they're really good. And like there's a style there that is, whoever drew this has very much a very unique style, and but one thing I was wondering was if maybe they didn't intend to maybe do that, or were thinking just in case, because in they had permission obviously to use footage from the shows, but in those images they're very careful not to have any copyright Star Trek stuff in the images themselves. Like I don't know if you noticed this,
didn't notice that.
but anytime you see somebody in a Starfleet uniform, they've got a circle.
Oh, really?
Instead of the star, or the Starfleet insignia. So that made me wonder if they weren't thinking that we'd like to be able to market these.
Yeah.
And I hope they do.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I would buy one. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of those were made for really cool pinup art. I mean, to make posters out of.
Yeah.
Those are really cool. Well, we've been at this for about half an hour. What else do we want to talk about? Because there's a whole gambit that we haven't even run yet.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the one thing that I found a little frustrating for me, just because I have a really hard time with names and faces. Where
This is Adam.
yeah, well, I have trouble with my friends as well.
That's insert your name
it's
here.
even worse when it's people I'm not seeing on a daily basis. So we hear about all these writers and producers, and I know about the names. But when I see them on screen, a lot of times, I'm like, okay, thank you for putting the name in the corner. Now I know who that is. But when I see them the next time and they don't have the name, I'm like, okay, well, this is just a person talking now. I have no idea. I'm lost. And so I had a lot of that with this documentary, because they put the name in it once, sometimes twice, but then by the end, they were just putting up pictures of talking heads, and I had no idea who anyone was. So it wasn't that bad, but I mean, there were a few people where I couldn't remember who they were. And I didn't know if you guys had that at all.
I did not have that problem, really. You and I talked about this earlier, and I can understand your complaint about Maurice Hurley's name being up there too often if they want to show you
that guy. They had
um,
his name up there most of the
now,
time.
you knew what Michael Okuda looked like.
Well, yeah. I knew some of them.
Yeah.
But there were certain ones where I wasn't as familiar with them,
Sure.
and especially not as familiar with what they looked like. And it would help to have the name up, maybe another time or two for me.
I will say that I don't know that this movie is for everyone.
Right.
In the sense that some of the others are. Like, I think, I would say that most Trek documentaries have been. Trekkies is almost even more for people that haven't seen Star Trek in some ways, just because it's making fun of, the Star Trek fans as hard as it is, and a lot of Trek fans don't like that. But I mean, like, it's not really a supplemental thing for all the things that we've had before telling us about Star Trek. This kind of is that, right? I think even the Captains is maybe a little bit more accessible than this. I think there are places where you almost even need to be more savvy about general television production than your average viewer will be to really appreciate it. And as I said, there are places where Shatner is like, okay, for lay people, explain this, but sometimes the jargon maybe gets a little heavy for your average viewer. I mean, like, I know you don't have that problem because you keep up with this kind of stuff, but to have a little bit of objectivity and sit back a little. What do you think? Like,
yeah, I could see what you're saying. Definitely, like, explaining like the economics of television broadcasting and stuff, and production. Definitely.
Something that I felt rusty on and was like, I'm glad that I've ever looked into this.
Yeah.
I think it is still hugely entertaining.
Yeah, and they do explain enough that you're not just sitting there feeling totally lost and like, I don't know half of the words in that sentence. And especially some of the big terms, like you said, Shatner makes sure to come in and say, okay, now explain what that means. But So I never felt super lost or floundering in any way, but there were certainly things that I'm sure if I had a better understanding of it, I'd get more out of it.
Yeah. But it did, but to your point with not knowing names and faces, I was really glad that I had watched so many of the special features on the DVDs and felt like, and realized that I take that for granted. Mm-hmm. Because I'm just a person that has studied this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a while, but I mean, like, there was a time when I looked very deep into this stuff, a lot, and I know that you have, probably even more than I have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about
to some
that.
degree,
But
but some of the names stick with you better than they do me, especially behind the scenes things, people. But yeah. So anyway, that's a fair criticism. I don't think it's a problem for people that really know their Star Trek, and I think that for the most part, I mean, obviously you really know your Star Trek, but you don't look behind the scenes as much.
Yeah, I know the story stuff, and that's what I'm really interested in. The behind the scenes stuff, I haven't really looked into as much. And like I said, I know a lot of the names, and I know the overarching stuff of the backstories.
I guess I feel the need to ask you this question then, Adam. Is this maybe... Because I said that it feels longer than 55 minutes, in that it's so dense and they got a lot in, but does it ultimately watch a little bit more like a DVD featurette than it does a documentary that stands on its own?
I don't know. I could see where you say that. Maybe
I'm not sure. I'm just asking the question.
I'm not sure either. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it could be watched on its own, I think, but it also does. You know, I mean, it's a behind the scenes thing, so maybe it does. You know, a lot of stuff will, is going to have that feel, I think, regardless of.
As I said, he did do a really good job of having a central theme. It's about power. I do think he lays that on maybe a little thick. He says it over and over again. But on the other hand, he's bringing out a theme. You know, just like you should when you're telling a story. He's seeing something that keeps coming up in the interviews, and and I don't know that he's forcing that in the interviews. He keeps mentioning it and directing people in that direction. But I don't know that he's directing them so much as just, this is a theme I keep noticing, and I feel the need to keep saying, this person was obsessed with power or couldn't give up their power or whatever, to see if the person on the other side of the conversation would agree with me or not. Yeah. And if they keep going with me, then that's the movie, that's the through line. And that's what he really kind of brought to the forefront. That and the whole like battle strategy, the poker thing.
Yeah. That
executive was fascinating.
Yeah, and that's a guy, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't right now either. We should have had a list, but yeah, I thought he was really interesting in like the way he and Patrick Stewart talked about each other.
Yeah,
was really interesting.
Different stories, yes, about the similar incidents, I guess.
Yeah.
Was that Pike?
Yeah,
his name was Pike.
And how could like of all people we should remember Pike? We should remember a guy named Pike.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because, in a lot of ways, that guy strikes me as kind of the epitome of what you think of when you think of a network executive.
Exactly.
And yet, I could kind of see why he acted the way he did also. And he seemed really interesting and personable in a weird sort of way. But, like, the way he came at it was, I'm kind of ruthless and cutthroat, but you have to be in this business.
Yeah, it's a business. That's how he's approaching it, It's like... We're in this to make some money here. This is the only reason I don't care about your fandom.
Yeah.
All I want is...
But even beyond that, wasn't it interesting that both instances, if he's right about it, because then there's conflicting things where it's like, well, I don't even remember if it happened that way. But were both instances where he's talking about like a bluff. That he pulled on somebody. He won both times, and ultimately it was a calculated move that kind of had to happen. But I love that. I mean, Shatner can be kind of ruthless about things too, and I thought it was fascinating when he told the story about how he told Patrick Stewart, he made him wait for 15 minutes in uniform. And that, like wearing the Starfleet uniform. That was my favorite story. And but then after Patrick Stewart, I was wondering just how how much it was exactly like that or not.
Yeah.
But then in public he makes him wait that long, and then he shows up, and he's like I heard that you're not happy, you're not being challenged enough as an actor, so we're gonna give you 2 episodes and then you're done. And then he's like, what? And he was totally bluffing because he knew that Patrick Stewart would change his mind. But with that, and also with telling Roddenberry that he was gonna ban him from the lot if he didn't get if he didn't go along with the 2-hour pilot. Someone explained to me why Roddenberry was so on about it's only going to be an hour. I don't understand that.
Yeah, that was weird to me too.
Is that probably because maybe he wasn't used to writing 2 hours? I don't know.
I don't know what that was, but I just thought that guy was really interesting because he kind of made me buy that maybe some of that was necessary, which I don't feel great about. But I just thought it was, anyway, what I meant to say was, I thought it was fascinating that Shatner was like, oh, that's horrible. It's like, John, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And this is Shatner!
Yeah. And then, of course, it turned out for the best in both, at least from his telling. So.
My favorite thing in the whole movie, now that we're there, is when he says, to this day, I think it was that guy, John Pike. Well, I think it was John Pike. To this day, I have no idea what Encounter at Farpoint was about. And I was like, yeah, me neither. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then he was losing his mind by how successful it was and how much the executives liked it and stuff. And he was like, everybody was blown away by it. He was like, I don't even know what's going on.
It's like, it doesn't even really have an ending.
It looks great. It looks like a movie.
You know how he yeah, and like they said that about the Cage too, and they still asked for another pilot.
They did say that. Yeah.
You know how we've been getting a whole lot lately of, and a lot of them have been great, of these comic book stories that have adapted earlier versions of things. And we got that with, if you haven't read it, you need to. But we got that with Sitting on the Edge Forever. With Allison's
they
original
made a comic
screenplay.
of that?
Oh yeah, I'll let you borrow it. It's wonderful.
Wow.
It's cool. Yeah, and
drugs and all that.
Yes,
stuff.
and that's all in there, and it makes it better. It's really interesting, and also really good. But anyway, I would love to see that done with whatever DC Fontana's original script was.
Oh, for Farpoint.
Yeah, like what would Farpoint have been like without Q and with a story that actually made sense as far as Farpoint Station went? Because I don't know what any of that's about and what's going on with that. But I mean, you wouldn't want Star Trek without Q, but just a what could have been. It might have been interesting to see what that story would have been without that. But you have to give Roddenberry Q. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that he should have made a story that made no sense because suddenly we had this other thing in there. But and also all the talk about how he's an atheist, but he put God in Star Trek. That was all really interesting to me. And like where exactly that comes from, and because you got, I want to say again, it was Ron Moore. You got people saying. It's weird that he put God in there, and where was his head at that time? I don't know if that was God or if that was Roddenberry as God. The more I thought about it,
Yeah.
like, is Q not Roddenberry?
Right.
Kind of, if you really think about it.
Right.
Like putting himself in there and saying, "Look, humanity, you still have a long way to go."
Yeah, he's like telling us, he's like
you
lecturing us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
I have a brand new interpretation of that character, at least in Farpoint.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that until just now, but like I think that's maybe what's going on there. Anyway, any final thoughts on this documentary? What didn't we talk about that you wanted to?
We didn't talk that much about. We did talk about him, but we didn't talk about him. Maurice Hurley.
Yeah.
And just how,
or the lawyer guy. We didn't talk
about him either.
Yeah.
Yes, I had heard about the lawyer guy before this. I think Patrick Stewart even talked about the lawyer guy in the captains a little bit. Like,
did he? I forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah, but they got Leonard Maislich was his name, and it's just so weird that Roddenberry. He became like Roddenberry. I don't know. It's like the Godfather. He was like Robert Duvall in that movie. He was like the guy that was like, you know, in charge of basically like insulating, you know, Roddenberry from the other forces and stuff. Yeah. That he went into somebody's computers, and while they were at lunch, it was messy. Yeah, that was the weird part. Yeah, that they. I guess they say they did ban him after that. And
Yeah, but then he crept back in.
That's not how he got back in. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, and then there was like, I think there was more than one person that talked about how they wished he would die.
Yeah.
They had to go to the Writers Guild to get.
The one guy
this.
said that he, when he was clutching his chest almost, he was like,
Die.
die. And then the other guy was dreaming of knocking him out that open window.
And then they show it in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And that
Really
was
bounced.
great. When we say, if you haven't watched this, when we say cartoon, they're drawings. They're like political cartoons almost.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But what about Hurley?
Just how insane he was. Like
Yeah.
when he said when the actors didn't want to do a certain scene, he's like, "To hell with it! I'm gonna kill." Or the next episode is gonna be the destruction of the USS Enterprise. We're gonna have a whole season-long arc to determine what
And what was great about that is I could not decide if he was serious or joking.
Yeah.
Where he was like, just to heck with it. We'll just I kept thinking, is he saying that's what he'd like to do, or would he totally have done that?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, he seems like the kind of person that would have actually tried something like that. Like he was that off the wall.
Yeah,
almost or unhinged.
You know what else I didn't know? I didn't know that season 2 first of all, I didn't know that the writer's strike affected season 2 in any way except for that last episode. I was not aware that started with the writer's strike. That explains a lot. Although it's interesting because I still say season 2 is leaps and bounds above 1,
it is.
and that there are a number of episodes that are like because one more again I can't remember who's saying. I think it was more again, but I forget. Somebody said I'm almost positive that the first 2 seasons are almost unwatchable. I disagree with a few with a few in 2.
Right.
And Conspiracy, and I love the Conspiracy almost didn't happen. Good God, that's like one of the only good episodes of season 1.
Right.
But yeah, I did not know that season 2 was originally supposed to be one long arc about the Borg.
I didn't know that either. I guess that was a casualty of the writer's strike. But yeah, like several scripts, like the opening of season 2, The Child, that was a reused script from Star Trek Phase 2.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Then they changed. I think it was supposed to be Ilea.
Oh, you know
they
what?
Made it
I knew
Deanna.
that.
Yeah.
I might have known that from you, but I had heard that before. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Were there any more like that?
I can't remember. Well, later on, Devil's Due was a reused script from Star Trek Phase 2 also.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they did any more reused scripts. But yeah, they definitely had to.
You will refrain from making the Advocate disappear.
Yeah. They had to cut the season, like, it's shorter than it was going to be. That was the main thing. And that clip show.
Oh, it is shorter, isn't it? What was it, like 18 or 22?
I think it was like 22. There was like 2, or it's probably like 3 episodes shorter, maybe, I think. Yeah. That was supposed to be.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but I guess it never occurred to me that was the straight. I guess that makes sense. I also didn't realize how much Diana Muldaur and the rest of the group didn't really get along.
Yeah.
That was a thing I hadn't really heard before.
I think I heard that in another like special feature or something like that, but I didn't know like the extent of it and stuff.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, I can sort of. I guess you can sort of see a little bit of friction on the screen, just that like.
Yeah.
But then again, everything was awkward in first season anyway.
Right.
So.
And I think they were just angry too about the way that they had treated the network. It wasn't anything against Diana Muldaur maybe necessarily, but the way the executives had treated Gates McFadden and stuff. And she was fired because she was trying to say, this is stupid, why are we doing this like and no, the people didn't want to hear it. Yeah.
By the way, anybody wondering, when I said first season, I just mean that, like, because I know she was added second, but I just mean, like, first season, the way everybody was acting, because of the weird scripts and tying the hands behind writers' backs and stuff, it was awkward anyway. So it would have been really easy to think that those people weren't getting along either. So anyway, I don't know. But yeah, it's really interesting that they almost went the serialized long form storytelling process that early, given that TOS was entirely episodic. Right. With some continuity callbacks, but entirely episodic, and that first season more or less was, but less so because you had more frequent guest stars and things already. But I mean, I knew about Unification was originally supposed to be a 5-parter, but then it got truncated into 2. But I didn't know about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. That would
Right.
have changed the face of Star Trek.
Because
the rest of it moving forward.
For
It
positive
would
or
be
negative,
so
it's
different.
hard to tell.
Yeah.
Certainly Voyager wouldn't have been what it was. Because we would have already done the Borg show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But again, it might not have ever... I mean, well, who knows what it would have been.
Yeah.
And remember that was before we even had the concept of the Borg assimilate people.
Right.
So we might not have ever even had that.
Yeah,
Like
we're
my
the
guess
aliens
is...
that put crap in there.
Right. Well, and they steal your technology, and that's all they care about.
That's all they care about.
My guess is that the Borg never would have assimilated had they started as the big bads of
Well,
season
and the
2.
Borg originally were supposed to be an insect race. From
Right.
Conspiracy. That was supposed to be like the thing at the end with the signal.
They're going to come back.
They're
And then
gonna
they
come
never
back,
did.
And they never came back.
I guess they had better
that
things
we
to do.
know.
But anyway, well, is that all you guys wanted to talk about? Was there anything else that we should have mentioned that we didn't? I think this video is going to be as long as that documentary. Well, everybody, thanks always for watching. Sure hope you enjoyed it, and we'd love to know what you thought of this documentary if you watched it. It would be weird if you watched this being almost the length of the documentary and you didn't actually watch it. But we'd love to know what you thought about it, and like I said, ultimately the aesthetic and the editing of this is one of the coolest documentaries I've seen in a long time. And I love how much good Star Trek reference we have, both in print and on film, but that we have so many good Star Trek documentaries now.
Yes.
There's just, if you want to know the ins and outs of this, it's there. And I mean, a lot of it is there. Especially now that a lot of the old documents from the production of TOS have been released. Like, now we have a lot of stuff that we never even knew about before. So it's really cool. I mean, you could, there should be classes on this because it would be very easy to just take material that's out there. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to run a Star Trek class. I would love to do that.
And I guess they've recovered the files from Gene Roddenberry's computer from the 80s too. So they got with a bunch of
that's neat
documents pertaining to Next Generation and stuff. So I don't know if that's how that's going to be released or anything.
Well, hopefully it is. What I would hope is that we would get a These Are the Voyages format book for TNG, because that thing. Have you read any of that? The big. I think that's what those are called. The big volumes that have all those documents and are like the most thorough history of the making of TOS ever. I mean, they're like this thick, and it's season to see. I'll show it to you. I've got the first one. They sent me one for a review copy. And I did a recommends on it, and I haven't gotten the other two yet. But I'll show that to you because that's really interesting, and debunks a lot of myths. But anyway, thanks again for watching, folks. We sure appreciate it, and we'll see you again hopefully in the next couple weeks. I know we haven't done these in quite a while. I tell you what we'll do next time. If you want to come back next time, I'm putting you on the spot. But if you decide to come back, what we'll do is we'll come back and do another character spotlight, and we'll let Adam pick the character this time.
Oh. Cool.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Well, thanks again for watching, folks. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
And I'm Adam.
See you later.